Good morning, everyone, and a warm welcome to Mumbai Angels Network Reboot 2 Industry Edition, a series of events focused on the challenges and opportunities for specific sectors in the new normal. Before we begin, I request all of you to please keep your devices on mute so that we can hear our speakers clearly and participate better. The session is divided into 40 minutes of panel and 20 minutes of Q&A. Do send in your questions to us during the chat. Our team will curate it and we'll try our best to get them answered by our esteemed panelists. Our sector in focus for today is retail and e-commerce. I would like to acknowledge our sponsors and partners for the session. Event partners, Ideal Insurance Brokers, Taxation Partner, Tax Mantra Global, Supply Chain and Logistics Partner, Justify, Session Partners, PitchBook and Easy Datun. Our panel for today is Kuldeep Pandit, founder and CEO, whom Jiny, and who is an ex-Coca executive. He is an expert in launching and scaling up new businesses, portfolios, and products across online, FMCG, and healthcare, and has a deep understanding of end-to-end customer long-term value creation. He has multicultural experience, having worked across countries such as Japan, China, Australia, among others, across multiple industries and categories, donning the hat of general manager and business head of sales, marketing, and supply chain. Kuldeep has over 10 years of experience in general management with both Johnson & Johnson and Coca-Cola in India and APAC, where he was leading and transforming businesses estimated at USD 100 to 350 million in size. Our next panelist for today is B. Rajesh, retail expert and author. Rajesh is a well-known Indian retail expert and thought leader who has pioneered many retail ideas and innovation. He has handled varied functional roles across a wide repertoire of formats. As a part of the senior management team of several startups, his expertise in retail spans strategic and also operational areas. He has authored several books such as The Ultimate Guide to Smart Shopping, Break Free, Out of Syllabus, and The Indian Retail. Our next panelist for today, Vidur Vyas, is the CEO of Northside and an ex-CMO of Pepsico Foods. Vidur is the founder and CEO of Northside, a strategy and execution consulting company that partners with young companies in the consumer space to build brands, build differentiated products, and transform operating models. He has over 23 years of experience working with multinational and family-owned companies, spanning across consumer packaged goods, mobile applications, and business consulting. Previously, he has held senior leadership roles as VP Marketing for Hike, Senior Director for Nutrition and Beverage Innovation for PepsiCo India region, and Chief Marketing Officer for PepsiCo Foods Business in India. This session for today will be moderated by Dr. Ramaswamy Iyengar, a renowned retail expert, writer, and consultant, and also the ex-professor of retail at Welingkar Institute. Professor D.A. Ramaswamy Iyengar, who has grown in the retail industry from 1967 to date, has been a part of retail MNC for 34 years with leading brands such as Bata, Nike, Teleshopping, Mothercare, Pantaloons, etc. across various senior positions. He has served as a professor in retail management for about 17 years in leading business schools. Most of his studies and research were in the area of retailing and marketing. He has done extensive study in the UK market to understand the various international retail strategies and techniques. Currently, he is a trainer, consultant, writer, and focuses on nurturing talent in the retail segment. I would like to thank our panelists for taking their time and giving us and our audience this opportunity to learn from them and their insights. Without taking much time, over to you, Dr. Iyengar.
Thank you very much, Shivangi. Nice for your good introduction. And almost all these panelists are very enthusiastic and they have a great knowledge and experience in the field of retail today. And the discussion is definitely going to be interesting. I welcome all of you participants as well as the panelists today, so that let us have a good contribution to understand what is the current situation and how we are going to go about it is the current crisis. So should we start with Mr. Vyas, so that let him give his view. What is going to happen after the shutdown and what challenges the retail industry is going to face and how we are going to face it. So if you can throw a little light on it.
Thank you, Dr. Iyengar, and thank you all for participating. Just at the beginning, I would like to say over the next 9 to 12 months how the scenario will pan out. It'll be in three phases. The first phase is likely to be from March to July, which we are in currently, where the consumer is going to be severely restricted. The second phase is going to be from August to October, where there will be cautious reopening. And I use the word cautious because even though the governments may open earlier, the consumer is likely to remain cautious. And the last phase, I think, will be after November, where the economy will fully reopen. And that's also coincides in India, specifically with the marriage season, buoyancy, things which will be medical cures will be much better. The knowledge of the disease will be much better. So I think the economy will open up in November. So first of all companies, including startups, and more importantly for startups, because we know that they are in a cash crunch situation and they survive on a day-to-day basis. This is how it's going to pan out.
Okay.
The second point is from a consumer standpoint, and how will it pan out for all industries and specifically retail, which we are talking about today, is that you think in terms of in-home and out-of-home as one vector, and affordable products and slightly less affordable or more expensive products as the another quadrant. So in all your businesses, wherever you operate, whichever startup you are, you try and categorize yourself in home or out of home, affordable or not affordable, and the affordability is determined by the lowest player in that category. In the first phase, which was March to July, the more affordable in-home products will grow, and startups which are in that bucket should continue to invest behind marketing in the way they can with their affordability individually, because the consumer is in home, he is looking for affordable products, the economic uncertainty is high, and therefore that combination is going to be very important. Just to give you an example, in-home salon products or frozen raw products which can be cooked, cooking yourself, or for example, equipment that is used inside the house, whether it's utensils or even furniture. Like for example, if you would talk about furniture, you could think in terms of office equipment, because a lot of people are converting into home offices. Stuff like that, where you can think in terms of in-home. So March to July, you remain focused there. And for startups which are in other areas, other segments, you think in terms of rationalizing costs and how you can go through that. August to October, I think the period is going to be a little bit better. And again, the focus is largely in-home. So even if you're more expensive in-home, you try and figure out solutions to make it more affordable. And those of you who are in out-of-home consumer solutions, you try and innovate to provide that in-home. For example, hotels, restaurants, and eateries which are in the retail sector. How can you provide an in-home service? These are the questions. How can you go and make it more affordable? What can you do on your websites? If you are in the furniture business, for example, or in the electronics business, can you market your more affordable in-home solutions? Or even if they are expensive, can you give them on installments? Can you deliver them to the consumer at their home? The third phase, which is largely going to be from November onwards, is where out-of-home solutions will open up much more. Starting with the affordable ones again first, and then it will be the more expensive ones. So for example, automobiles or any other out-of-home solutions that are there. Retail will open up. So your restaurants and eateries and party places and coffee shops, you should think in terms of how you could give assurances to consumers, buyback offers, discounts to start to boost the consumption. Now, I'd like to back this up, just take a minute more, is by some research that we had done in China, where the economy has opened up for the past 3 months. And we see the following key points, and then we can take some questions later, is that 60% of consumers within 3 months do return to post-opening, post-reopening, 3 months, within 3 months, which is say in the August to October framework in India. 60% people return to offices. That is a fact. 20% continue to stay at home and work, and 20% people either change their jobs or find another thing, or they are looking for opportunities. Unfortunately, there is going to be some job losses. So that's how the thing really works out. And even in the case of retail, the research that we've done in terms of retail traffic, about 50% returns within 3 months. So 50% of the traffic that a shop was witnessing pre-COVID comes back, and it goes up to about 75% in certain cases. So like pharmacies, OTC products, health products, in-home services, salons, start opening up. So that is how the picture is. So it's not going to be doom and gloom. I think we just have to wait out till August, in summary, and focus on how in this period, how we can get in home.
One more minute, if you can just give an idea, where the investors, do you recommend the investors to invest in which area? If at all, if someone wants to invest in retail, in which area you suggest that they should invest it?
See, the investors, I would say that in-home is definitely, kind of thing which they should immediately latch on to. Healthcare is a good sector to invest in. Food and beverage is going to be good. And I think more importantly, investors are now going to should look at per unit economics much more closely than what they have been doing, because the investment opportunities are going to be, will have to be scrutinized a little bit more. That's one. The second is, investors also will be of two kinds. One is investor which is looking at scale long-term returns.
Okay.
And the other one is largely what I call is a private equity kind of mindset investor, where you're looking at a shorter period for returns. And I think both will have slightly different outlooks. But by and large, I think unit economics are going to become more important. They should become more important. And we should look at, how the gross margins and whether the affordable products that startups have, or even the more expensive products, whether they offer returns. So that's the investor outlook. I think that's going to happen. I was reading somewhere that a Bain consulting report where they showed that globally buyouts in the month of April have fallen by about 50%. Global buyouts in the month of April from the preceding months. They fell by about 50% in 2008 to 2009 period. And in when the economic crisis was there in 8 or 9. And now in COVID, the same fall in buyouts is about 60%. So it's following the same pattern.
Okay.
The pattern, the economic pattern is the same as it was roughly in 2008-9.
Good. Great contribution. Yes, Mr. Kuldeep, Pandit sir. I would like to hear from you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Iyengar.
Short term, middle term, and the long term. What we are supposed to do?
Yeah. I think building on what Vidur said, let's try to kind of understand what are we talking about. We're talking about industry which is 1 trillion out of a 3 trillion economy. So if you see retail as an industry, roughly around 1 trillion right now in India. Now, there are three big components of this industry, and every piece will have to be looked at individually rather than kind of generalizing answers. So you have, I would say, traditional trade, which is say close to 900 million. Now, this traditional trade is going to have different implications in different sectors. Then you have e-commerce, which is almost 50, 60 billion now in India. And then you have the whole industry of modern retail, which is 30, 40 billion. Now, again, so one is there are going to be different impacts across different channels. My personal view is that e-commerce will grow faster than it would have otherwise grown. I saw that for my own business, that during the COVID time, our revenues multiplied 5 times in 45 days. And I see the trajectory clearly going forward. So anything which is home delivered, I think, and if it has convenience of not going to the shop, that is going to be definitely, kind of superior for next 1 or 2 years. Number two, any place where you have to get into crowds. So whether it is a mall or cinema or theater or hotel or restaurant, I think there will be avoidance for some time. So anything which is a large format probably will get the most impacted. I think individual groceries or individual kirianas or whatever they are, I would say they will have an impact, but not so much impact. So I would say individual groceries will be more or less kind of a flattish. Malls will be really, going through a crisis, and your e-commerce will be really booming. So that's kind of at a very, very broad level. Now let's come to the second question of industries within retail. Again, every industry is not going to behave the same way. Anything which is discretionary, I think there were two lenses Vidur used, which was of price and other, but I would use a different lens of whether this is something I can postpone or avoid. Now, it doesn't really matter. If it is milk, I might still continue buying my most premium milk because it is non-discretionary. I might still continue buying the most premium vegetable because it is non-discretionary. So I think you're going to see the lowest impact of discretionary. So for example, for my business, the impact of perishables was virtually non-existent. We didn't have any impact in perishables. You come to discretionary spendings, obviously you're going to see different levels of impact. Say, for example, you talk about a car, obviously they're going to be massively impacted, even though there's an argument on the other side saying that people are going to buy more cars because they will not like to move in public transport. I don't think anybody is spending money to buy cars right now. Okay. Same way, if it is a appliance or whatever can be avoided will be avoided by people till the economic certainty would not come. So the question is, what is your business in? Is your business a discretionary product or is it a non-discretionary product? If it is a discretionary product, you will have a much bigger impact than if it is a non-discretionary product. If it is an essential, I think you're going to have a different impact. Second thing that is going to be very important is there physical contact between you and the consumer? Now, higher the amount of contact, the lesser is going to be the potential. And again, I want to kind of quote from my company. We sell almost 2,000 products and 200 services on one app. So we saw our dry cleaning was not impacted, but our haircut was impacted. Our massage was impacted. So anything where you have to go inside a house and actually get into a physical contact, that got massively impacted. We were not selling maids and drivers and tutors because they had to go inside the house and provide the service. Whereas, say, dry cleaning, where you were just kind of taking clothes, not taking clothes, that did not get impacted. Contactless deliveries are going to be the norm of at least for some more time. We saw, as I said, our revenues multiplying 4 to 5 times because we were completely contactless. I think the desire for people to build human-to-human contact is going to be restricted. So I would say one dimension is discretionary, another dimension is contact, and third dimension which I would say this is more from a short to medium term. I think the third dimension, which is more from a long-term perspective, from a consumer behavior point of view, is going to be, can your business be automated or not? I mean, and what is the unit economics around automation? And if the answer to that is yes, I'll give you an example. Say, for example, medicine. These can be very easily automated. I mean, the cost of supplying a strip is nothing. But atta chawal dal, maybe not, because your bulk to value ratio is still disproportionate. So I would say in long term, if there is any product or service where the automation of making it available in home is easier, those businesses are going to go through the e-commerce or the online route. And wherever there are more and more challenges coming in, they might still go through the traditional retail Kirana route. So, I kind of wanted to share a little more about the intricacies we are going to get into as you kind of dissect individual retail channels and individual retail industries within those channels.
Okay. Good. So this is what we'll have to think about it now. And how do you think the supply chain is going to react? Because all along one side, the goods were blocked because of this shutdown. Now, how they are going to regularize the supply chain? Will it be faster, slow, or they will wait and watch and do? What is going to happen in the supply chain and logistics?
Yeah, so let me say that, again, what we saw during the COVID was an Ashirwad Ada, which I used to procure at, say, 320 rupees, went to 360 rupees.
Okay.
On a MRP of 370. So you were getting virtually 3% margin. So it was like you were doing base seva by selling that. Now, still the back-end supply chains are inadequate. You don't have availability of products. So I see that one of the biggest challenges, what we are not realizing, is labor is already in crisis. So for you to get supply chains up and running, the biggest piece of that supply chain is the labor. Beyond transportation.
Yes.
I would presume in India, maybe close to 10 million people which were involved in supply chain would have gone back to villages by now. How many more will go back and not come back is something that we need to figure out.
Naturally.
So I would say supply chains will be constrained.
Okay.
They will have to become more nimble. They were anyway becoming very, very nimble because of the fact that nobody wanted to keep inventories, the margins were low, and so on. But they will have to become more nimble now. And it also depends on how government responds to this whole labor issue.
Okay.
I think 3 states have already kind of removed minimum wages. But if that is kind of the direction where labor reforms come in, and you don't have to kind of have the labor compliances that you have today, I would say supply chains can get back quickly. But if those restrictions remain where you can't fire people and Supreme Court is giving a judgment saying that I am staying this order by government and all that, I don't see supply chains coming back efficiently very fast. So I think a lot of it will depend on, number one, what is the availability of labor. I don't think transport is a big problem, but labor is surely a very clear problem that we see right now.
True.
Number two, how is government working on the policy piece? Again, if they are making labor reforms easy, the process is going to be easier. If they keep labor reforms what they are, I think anyway it is going to be very tough to kind of make supply chain nimble. And third, I would say from a long-term direction anyway, the supply chain is going to become GIT, it is going to become nimble, minimum inventories, all those basic things that we've been talking for decades now. I think those are going to be extenuated, so to say, going forward.
Certainly. Good. Great contribution. I think I'll switch over to Mr. Rajesh, who has got a great experience in the field and also a good author. I would like to hear from you, sir. Since each of the state has got its own principles and problems at the moment because of this COVID, will it affect a major portion of retail business because of change of policy between state to state, right? And also I would like you to suggest us organized versus unorganized, or you call it as traditional versus organized. Now, most of the malls were shut and none of the stores were functioning. They had a great loss and their inventories are piled up. Now, can you just share some of your experience, how we are going to overcome this policy matter as well as organized versus traditional?
Thank you for having me here with all of you. Uh, my first comment in the context of what Professor said was one of the fundamental policy issues that India has with regard to the retail sector, and I'm using the word sector specifically because retail has not been given an industry status.
Okay.
I've written extensively about it, and this is one of the fundamental constraints for retail as a sector in India. Therefore, because it doesn't have an industry status, you have arbitrary guidelines, you have multiple rules, even the basic guiding legal framework, which is a Shops and Establishment Act. The central government has published only a draft act, which different states are free to adopt or not adopt. For example, Maharashtra has adopted it and therefore stores can be open 24/7. Whereas in Tamil Nadu, they have just published it as a gazette notification, which means it can be withdrawn at any point in time. There are several states where they have not even been adopted. So when it comes to policy framework, India really needs to look at retail as an industry because it then gives a far more structured approach to this sector. You can define segments, just like how in manufacturing you have your micro, small, medium, MSME, and then your large scale. Similarly, you can actually define stores. You can say the street hawkers are micro, the small bunk shops, the panwalas are all micro, the small kirana guys are all small scale sector. Linked to that, you can define credit criteria for all these people. You can formalize the access of credit. One of the biggest challenges for retailers, especially the small retailers, is accessing easy credit. And they are heavily dependent on the cash flow rotation. In fact, one of the biggest challenges that the Kirana person will be having right now and will continue to have, at least for the short term, is cash flows, because they operate on a relationship-based model. So they can't deny the 1 week or 10-day credit that they extend to their regular customers.
Right.
And the regular customer, even if they have cash, are used to the fact that I can pay this guy after 2 or 3 days. Whereas, going back to what Mr. Kuldeep was talking about, supply chain right now is slightly constrained in the context of FMCG. And also to some extent when it comes to grocery. So a lot of these Kirana shops are forced to either go and pick up from the distributor or go to the wholesale markets wherever it is open and available and pick it up on a cash and carry basis. So that is the very broad perspective when it comes to the policy perspective and with regard to the Indian sector. And you can spend possibly the next 30 minutes talking about it. You don't have a common franchise guideline or a legal framework or a fiscal framework when it comes to managing franchise because you have external payments outside India, so on and so forth. Now coming to the next point that you asked me to elaborate, when it comes to the current situation, again, Mr. Vidur and Mr. Kuldeep have spoken about what is going to happen now, what is going to happen maybe after September, October. I have a slightly different point of view. See, the reality is, if we are going to segment the shoppers or the consumption groups in our country, if you use the formal terminology of socioeconomic groups, you have SECA, which is the upper class, then you have upper and upper middle class, then you have SECB, which is maybe your middle class, and so on and so forth. So let's keep the SEC, C and D, which is largely your working class, the blue collar workers who have very limited cash flows, money. They are going to be definitely affected, even though the government has given, the MHA has given the notification that wages should not be cut, etc. Migrant laborers or guest workers, whichever terminology works, would be a part of that group. Having said that, food is not going to be negotiable because obviously hunger is not something that we can put off. When it comes to the middle class and above, a large segment of them have continued to get their salary in the last 60 days.
Mm.
So from a fund flow, inflow point of view, no major change has happened. From a fund outflow point of view, again, there has been significant savings in a manner of speaking when it comes to consumption. And one of the supporting facts of this is the reality that a lot of the EMI moratorium options when it comes to auto loan or home loan, etc., have not really been exercised by the salaried class, because they have the fund and in the bank they have the balance, and they felt it's just not worth accumulating interest on something that I can afford to pay. The other reality is, on an average, at least twice a week, twice a month, people tend to go out to a multiplex or a mall for a movie, night out, eat out, etc. They order in a lot of food, at least again twice or thrice a week in terms of pizza or whatever. So if you take the rough approximate cumulative amount they have not spent in the last, say, 60 days in these categories alone, you could take a very conservative estimate of anywhere between 50 to 60,000 rupees. A mall visit for a family of 3 is roughly 2,000 rupees. That's the kind of number I'm talking about. So when it comes to food, it has continued to be consumed. No major change. Possibly the only big challenge that's going to come about is supply chain, because like again Mr. Kuldeep pointed out, as factories ramp up, do I have enough labor? Do I have enough loaders? At the distributor end, do I have enough people to go to the markets to take orders and deliver and then go back again for cash collection, so on and so forth. When it comes to the non-food part, which is the entire lifestyle category of apparels or home-related products, etc., I feel there is a pent-up demand for two reasons. Number one, the regular, whatever average or minimal consumption that used to happen has not happened. The last 60 days, people have been sitting at home and it has not happened. Second, a lot of us, when we are working from home, we have noticed two things. One is, like Mr. Vidur was talking about, I have noticed that maybe I should have a better, working table, or maybe I should have one of those nice USB fans which blows into my face in the context of Indian summer, or maybe a tower fan, or so on and so forth. The other thing is, I have also noticed that the fan is making a noise, or my AC is actually having this slight rumbling that's happening after 2 hours of use. So there is going to be a long list of things that I would like to buy as soon as shopping kind of takes off. In terms of more stores opening, the online retailers being allowed to sell and deliver non-essential products, so that whole space is going to actually open up. And in that context, if you look at the seasonality of retail, any which ways, in a manner of speaking, March end, April, May is always a slightly dull period for retail in India, because you have board exams, people pay taxes, so on and so forth. Then people go on holidays, so they spend money on it. June, July is when it starts picking up, largely driven by the school purchase, college purchase, and so on and so forth, pre-monsoon. And then we get into the festival season. Festival season starts off typically by Dashera Diwali time. And my guess is, as long as there are no major sentiment hits, and when I mean sentiment hit, it may not be that my job is at stake. If I hear that there are a lot of jobs at stake, my sentiment is hit. A classic example is what happened in 2007, 8, 9, where Indian GDP was actually at a very, very good level. The economy was doing well, people were earning well, but because of the subprime crisis, there was this fear psychosis and retail spending crashed. Compare it to 3 years back, when actually, not actually 3 years back, 2013 or so, when the economy was really not doing too well, but the sentiment was very good. And lifestyle retail has clocked growth of as much as 20-25%. So I am qualifying my comment in the context of, if sentiment is not hit by Dashera Diwali, you will start seeing a fair amount of rebound when it comes to non-food which could be required, discretionary, non-discretionary, basically fulfilling the list that I am preparing at home when I'm sitting at home and working from home. Two more points in the context of what Professor was specifically asking me. One is in the context of the online retailing.
Okay.
Again, there are huge variances when it comes to online retail with regard to the operating ease. State governments have still not been very clear. For example, even physical stores, after the central government opened non-essential stores, state governments, like say in Tamil Nadu, had not given a clear guideline. So a store like say Bata, which was a standalone store, not in a mall, not in a market, and I happened to walk in and say, why are you not opening? And the person said, sir, we opened, but the inspector came and said, you are not supposed to open, close it.
Oh.
The same confusion is going to kind of compound unless there is a clarity with regard to the policy, with regard to guidelines, because once online retailers are in principle allowed to sell non-essential products, there might be a scenario where the police might stop them and say, hey, what is this? Why are you taking this big bundle? I mean, you're not allowed to deliver these things. So that clarity is going to have a huge impact when it comes to the online retail's non-essential aspect.
Okay.
The other thing is specifically in the context of the audience, which is largely people in the startup phase and investing space. Yes, there are huge investment opportunities in the Indian retail space. The challenge is to look at it from an end customer, end consumer benefit rather than the solution that I'm giving. In fact, I remember when we had a panel discussion like this in an earlier scenario, somebody asked me about online retail. Pardon me?
Time's up, I think. I think they have to take the question and answer for another 20 minutes, ma'am.
We can actually take some of the questions that have come up so far and then maybe continue with the discussion. Can we have the audiences on mute? I will take the questions to the panel and then we can have a discussion. Yeah. So I think one question that has come up right at the beginning is if we can look at some of the alternate channels through which sales can happen. Like one of the suggestions that have come up is maybe digital mediums such as WhatsApp, even maybe Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook.
Social media.
Yeah, any comments on the impact of digital media on sales at this point on marketing and sales?
WhatsApp is a medium that has been used extensively by the traditional small retailers for almost a decade plus now. In fact, the first I heard about a very interesting use of WhatsApp was this bangle seller. As soon as he got his consignment from places like Hyderabad and Rajasthan, etc., all he would do is take pictures and send it to his, a broadcast list in WhatsApp. And he would literally have bookings for almost 1/3 of his stock by the end of the day.
Okay.
So WhatsApp, yes, is a great medium for leveraging online orders and the fulfillment of that. But like I was just mentioning, it's not only the order taking, you also have to keep in mind, how am I going to fulfill the order? See, technology is only an enabler in a large part of the retail scenario.
Right.
Yeah. Kuldeep here. So let me say that I think irrespective of COVID, the digital solutions, whether it was mobile apps, whether it was websites, whether it was WhatsApp, whether it was inbound call centers or whatever those solutions were, they were going through an exponential trajectory anyway. And what this crisis has really done is get that exponential trajectory further accentuated. So I think it is needless to say that no matter what your business is, you need to create a digital equivalent of reaching out to consumers, because physical reach out is going to be a challenge. And even if it is, there are 0 cases in India, there is going to be a consumer psyche, which I will feel will prevail for at least a year, where I'll try to reduce non-essential contact. Yes, I'll go to work, I'll go to buy milk and whatever. But if there is non-essential contact, I don't think you will unnecessarily try to increase that. So I would say, because I see a lot of questions around F&B and small restaurants and whatever, I think it'll be a while before I would be going to a restaurant and eating in a restaurant. It'll be a while, or a cinema, or a hotel, or those kind of channels. It'll be a while, and therefore they need to look at digital solutions of reaching out to consumers, obviously building a delivery mechanism, because it's not just getting consumer orders, but how do you deliver it? And keep in mind that labor is going to be at a premium. We are paying almost 25% more to labor right now as we speak. So labor is not available. While we talk about so many job losses, whosoever is working at a higher salary than what he was working previously.
Yeah,
So I would say labor is going to be at a premium. I think Rajesh kind of very clearly alluded that technology can only be an enabler. You still need to find a delivery mechanism. So I would say those are some of the considerations everybody would have to look at as we speak. And needless to say, I would say anyway there was aggregation happening. So I see some of the people talking about digital landlords, kind of ruling cloud kitchens and restaurants. I would say it's unfortunate that the small businesses will vanish and bigger businesses will thrive. So, that will have implications for, I would say, increasing social unrest as more and more smaller businesses find it difficult to compete with Reliance doing what they're doing now in e-commerce, and with the kind of money that is pouring in Big Basket, Amazon, Flipkart, all these new channels. It is going to be extremely different scale at which we'll start operating. I mean, if you can't raise 100 million, for you to operate would be challenging. So the fact very clearly remains that the big will become bigger. So Amazon will move from $1 trillion to $5 trillion valuation in next 10 years, and small will vanish. So it will be a race against time for all of us, that either we have to quickly reach some size and scale because technology is disrupting in a big way, or it'll be tough for us to kind of survive, which is, I must say it's hard, but that's how it is. It is painful and hard. So whether it is small restaurants or whatever, they don't stand a chance in 5 years' time to kind of survive alone. It'll be very tough.
When we speak about e-commerce and digital platforms, I think it is very important that we also discuss returns, and which is also a key aspect of the business, because it is actually a fact that Amazon loses money on returns. And how do you think this will pan out in the post-COVID world, where people will be scared to return things, people may not want to accept things back, suppliers may not want to take back returns of goods once sold, not just because of expiry date and other issues, but because of the other hygiene concerns that may be playing around it, whether it is for discretionary or non-discretionary spends. Suddenly you may have a Fable Street who doesn't want to take back a shirt because it may have been worn by the user. So how does one look at this playing out in the coming months? The whole returns thing, what will be the impact on the suppliers as well as the buyers? Like, how will the economics of that work? And the platform, of course.
So I'll just like to just say, Vidur here, this is a great opportunity for e-commerce businesses to improve their unit economics. And what has been happening typically is that they have been charging less than what is required for convenience to the consumer. So I would think that there is a sizable opportunity for e-commerce players to correct and improve, not to make money on convenience, but at least to cover the cost and convenience. And I think they should do that. that will enable players to provide better service, and ultimately consumers are looking for better service. So that's the reason why they go to e-commerce in the first place, because it provides better service. It's as simple as that. And I think the time has come for players to do that. That's the first point. Second point, at an overall level, to what Kuldeep and Rajesh was saying, I think it's important to invest in digital practices for the longer run. So things like WhatsApp ordering, and which are, say, more transactional and definitely effective in some cases, only in some cases, may not be the long-term solution. So startups should invest in putting up their own website, which is an e-commerce enabled website, and it's not very expensive. I mean, if you look at the total cost of churning out an e-commerce website, it could be under 2 lakh rupees. So and you could tie up with delivery operators. You could tie up with everybody in terms of the supply chain to deliver to the consumer. So startups should not look at just trying to get into any transactional thing, but this is not going to go away. Digital penetration is going to increase, as what Kuldeep and Rajesh have pointed out. So I would urge people to do that.
Right. These change of policies of government, like 20 lakh crores is coming in, or 1955 Essential Commodities Act is going to change. All these things, will it have some impact on retail now? What do you feel, panelists?
All right. So let me try to answer this 20 lakh crores, because I have a very strong opinion on that 20 lakh crores, and I want to kind of speak that a little. So number one, let's understand that out of these 20 lakh crores, there are just 2 lakh crores, which is roughly 1% of your GDP, which is actual physical stimulus. The rest all is either deferred loans, deferred payments, and all those other things that we're talking about. So,
Right.
So we need to kind of be very careful about when we talk about this 20 lakh crores, because I think this number has got talked so much. But when you get into really details, I was trying to see what is the benefit I will get. There is not even a single rupee benefit I will get as a company.
Good.
I was not able to identify beyond somebody giving me a loan, which God knows at what rate of interest he will give me. And anyway, as startups, we are very averse to taking loans. It becomes a really challenging piece. So point number one. Point number two is even this physical stimulus, even if you talk about loans and everything else, I mean, the fundamental piece of this is going to non-retail. I have not seen any, because as Rajesh said, we are not even an industry. So there is no question of anybody addressing it as an industry and specific initiatives for this industry. So there is really, I would say, there is very little of this that is going to pour into retail. So therefore, I think somebody kind of making assumptions that a lot of benefit is going to come to retail, I would say I'm very circumspect about it. And therefore, I feel that this is a fight which we all will have to fight individually, kind of standing on our own legs. I am surely saying that Reliance is going to be a big disruptor as they launch e-commerce, because the kind of money that they are able to raise, 88,000 crores is what the rights issue is. Now that can easily kill 15-20% of the retail industry.
Okay.
So the time is going to be tough if you're not, and as I said, the scale at which some of these guys are going to operate is going to be at a very different level. And for you to kind of build unit economics which kind of competes with them is not going to be easy. I'm sorry, I'm sounding a little negative here, but the real fact is in e-commerce, the scales, we're talking about Big Basket at 10,000 crores. We're talking about Grofers at 5,000 crores. We're talking about Zomato and Swiggy at equivalent amounts. We're talking about Amazon and Flipkart at multiple billion-dollar scales. Now, when you want to compete your unit economics with those, it's not an easy job at all. So until unless you curate a model which is really differentiated on multiple fronts, for you to ultimately achieve unit economics, is not going to be easy at all. I mean, in my company, I burn 50% of my cash right now. But even at big basket scale, they burn 60-70% of cash.
Oh.
So, and I feel the funding also is going to be a challenge. We didn't talk much about funding.
Right.
The appetite of investors to invest in riskier businesses is going to be a challenge. While if there are differentiated riskier businesses, obviously anybody would go for that. I will just pause myself because I had a very strong opinion about this 20 lakh crores.
Sure. So Kuldeep, interesting point. If we can actually, the panel can spend a couple of minutes more discussing in greater detail on the investor psyche during this time. What are the kind of businesses that you think that investors would like to pick up? Since we also have some angel investors on our panel, what would you like to see in terms of the nature of the businesses, the valuations that are coming to you? Because this would again also tie in with the startup founders, because they would need to raise money at some point, maybe starting immediately, to actually have some kind of runway in the hope that they can tide through this time. So, I mean, we can start with Vidur, and if some of the other panelists can also share their view on it.
Please.
So, just from a startup standpoint, I would think that first let's look at what they have. They have really two options. One is to improve their unit economics and business model, and the other one is to kind of try and compete in this discounting war, which is there in some form, comes and goes, and it'll come and go again. I think the the main thing here is that startups which are small, they need to build their robustness on the brand and on the differentiated product that they're offering. And once that is there, then the discounting and the operating model can reduce. But if it's not there, then actually you will be competing with in a commodity market, and that may not be advisable. From an investor standpoint, again, it actually marries very well, because investors should look at robustness on four aspects, which is the brand that they're trying to build, the products which are differentiated or not. And I spoke earlier about this whole concept of in-home and discretionary, in-home, out-of-home, and whether it's
cycling correct the delivery वाला थोड़ी है.
May I request all participants to have your microphones on mute, please? This is the challenge of working from home. Sorry.
No worries. So yeah, so that's I think investors should look at that, and I think the harder the investors push on that aspect, the better it will be for the overall ecosystem. And startup organizations will start to look at what the core advantage is. So that's what it is, and investor money is going to dry up. I quoted some numbers on global buyouts, which is a reflection on how much money people are willing to invest, and that's already down by about 60%. That's a global study, so by Bain. So that's a clear indication of what's going to come, and therefore investors and startups both, because both are actually they are part of the same community and actually tied at the hip, joined at the hip. So we need to look at that.
Thanks, Vidur. So another question that has come up is in terms of the working capital flows of the e-commerce companies. I mean, if all of you have looked at into it deeply, so do you think that the cash positions are bettering, they're worsening? How do their balance sheets look like, or are they actually just burning cash to tide through these times? Because the assumption that is that right now e-commerce companies are doing phenomenally. They are the guys who are raking in the cash. But is that the reality, or is it very different and it's just about getting through the next day for them?
See, there is a survey that we at Northside have done on the startup and small scale industries, and every company is different, right? Their cash position is different and is unique. But at an overall level, we found from the survey that they had runway for 6 months. Say most of the companies had a runway for about 6 to, you would say, 2 quarters. Now, that money has to continue for them for a year. That's what the general consensus is, and it'll take us till that much time to come out of the crisis a little bit. And the IMF also says that the economies will come come back by 2021. So how do you half the cash burn would be the key goal for most startups, and they should do that. Now if they are in the affordable sector, in-home sector, then they can spend a little bit and get the top line up, which will improve the cash flow. But if they are not, then it would be better to conserve. That would be my, at a very macro level. But of course, every company is different and one has to look at that.
I would like to just add, one business perspective to what Mr. Vidur was talking about. I have a term which I use called as buying sales. Very simply put, buying sales is when you're offering disproportionate discounts to generate your sale value. In fact, thankfully, today we have moved away from this metric called GMV, gross merchandise value. At one point of time, that was the hot metric to chase. Okay. Tying back to what Mr. Vidur was saying and your question, Ms. Shivangi, the startups need to realize and move away that getting only top line is not going to be a long-term and viable proposition. And end of the day, any investor wants to see their money coming back with returns. They are not, kind of donating the money to any startup. So in the context of not only cash flow, but also the other comment you made about your balance sheet and your long-term P&L, this buying sales mentality needs to change. Discounting cannot be the only long-term or viable option that anybody can adopt.
Yeah,
Right.
I would agree with
Kuldeep
that.
here. See, if you see the cash burn of any startup, I mean, there are basically 2 or 3 big costs. There is a cost of customer acquisition, which is a significant portion of the total cost. Then for those which are technology enabled, obviously technology is a significant portion of the cost. And then third portion of the cost of the operational pieces. Now really, I think operationally, until unless you cut people or you cut warehouses or you cut whatever things, saving is going to be very difficult. So you will have to really downsize your business and optimize or build better profitabilities and whatever. But there is very little you can do on operational piece, except cutting back people, cutting back warehouses, and so on and so forth. Coming to technology, this is a very tricky piece because you reduce your investments in technology, you're going to lag behind. So, because there are people which are investing ahead of curve in technology. Now, coming to customer acquisition, now I think that's where we need to be very, very careful. And I agree with what Vidur said earlier, was that where you see your sales trajectory can improve, maybe you spend that money in customer acquisition. But say, for example, a restaurant, no matter what you do for next 3 months, no customer is going to the restaurant. So discounting is not going to work. So I would say you have to kind of very carefully dissect this problem of how do you reduce the cash burn.
Right.
And kind of take that decision for your own startup. And these are very tough decisions, I can tell you. I mean, when you have to sack people or close down pieces, these are not easy decisions, and government doesn't make it any easy for you anyway. They kind of put 20 regulations behind you to kind of make those decisions in. So I would say, every startup needs to look at these 3 big pieces of cost and then say, what do I need to do on each of these costs and what kind of cash burn can it reduce? For you to reduce a 50% cash burn, I think you will have to downsize. It's very difficult to do that kind of reduction in cash burn without really downsizing. And then obviously those are very tough decisions. Those are not decisions you can take for 1 month and then say on another month, I have to kind of do something different. So it's going to be a tough time for startups. I must agree that, the fact that the ability to raise money is limited, virtually government has done nothing. The fact that the big are becoming bigger, I think all of that is going to throw a lot of challenges for people which are building new businesses and are in infancy. But they have to weigh their options very, very carefully.
Okay.
Thanks, Kuldeep. I think we're running out of time. If the panelists would quickly like to give their closing comments, and then we can close the panel. We can start with Dr. Iyengar. Dr. Iyengar.
Yeah, to conclude, what I feel is this now. After suffering of this 3 months, the entire western part of the globe has affected very badly. Will be rethinking to invest in any countries, leaving their own country first. So when you ask about the investment part of it, the retailers will be seeking more investment from their own country people, investors, because they cannot expect from the western part, which was of a foreign direct investment. Now that can be an advantage for the Indian investors, according to me, right? And also make in India, yes, you are thinking that we should have our own of everything. I think our investors should be ready to help the retail industry to invest more and then to get returns within their own country is going to be the investment part of it when you raise about it. Now, when I'm coming to a conclusion part of it, I have noticed one point for each of the panelists I will give. Mr. Vyas said it should be affordable. That word, I liked it because after suffering of 3 months, every consumer will be interested to have an affordable product, affordable price, affordable services. That is going to be the hammering there. When I am coming to Mr. Kuldeep, he is suggesting that e-commerce can definitely take a good route now. This is the time we can take a turn. It is not even 3 to 4% at the moment e-commerce in India. If we can take it to 10 plus level, I think that is going to bring an additional revenue to the retail industry. And also his point of labor is going to be very expensive because all of them have gone to their own state now. We will not be getting the required labor in any of the retail industry. That's a great point. I appreciate it because retail is a man-managed industry. I think that is going to give a big blow to us. We should keep ourselves ready. Every state should have their own investment of human resources. Mr. Rajesh has got easy credit and cash flow. Excellent. And his gross merchandising value has to be considered at this juncture. Everybody has to concentrate on that. I think with this, we should conclude. If you have got some questions from, you have Kushi, you have some questions to ask? Or Mr. Patel, do you have some questions to ask? Or Kalpana, do you have some questions?
I think we can conclude right now. Vidur, Kuldeep, Rajesh, if you would quickly like to share your viewpoints, and we can conclude this panel.
Okay, Sir Shivangi has really coordinated very well this entire session. I'm thankful to you on behalf of the panelists and myself. And also our thanks goes to Mr. Akshay Mishra, who has coordinated, brought within a short time all of us into this panel. Thanks to him also. Great effort by M&A. We wish you all success.
Thank you, Dr. Iyengar. We'll just ask the other panelists for their concluding comments.
Yeah.
Well, I think Dr. Iyengar has summarized everything. And what I would just like to say is that, the times will change. And from August onwards, I think the economy and everything else will improve. The studies in China has shown that for most of the retail industry, about 60 to 70% of the traffic will come back by November, and then it will improve to almost 100% by next year. So you should wait out. These are actual studies that we at Northside have done. Similarly, for startups, the situation will start improving by August. So it's not all doom and gloom. Please hang in there and digitize yourself, invest in the right things, use this time to plan well and to build your competency on the digital side and improve the strength of your brand.
Kuldeep, sir.
Yeah, so let me say this, that every startup is at a very different stage of evolution. So I would not really like to make any generalizations whatsoever. I think every startup is in a different industry. It has a different cash flow. It has a different working capital requirements. it has a different consumer impact that it is going to see. So I would say the founders or the founding teams will have to carefully evaluate options available and then take calls. I would say that it is very easy for a founder to feel that we are invincible. But you have to be careful, pragmatic, and at the same time cautious. Corona just proved to us that you could have a magnitude of calamity like this hitting you. So my earnest request to all the founders is carefully evaluate where you stand and then do what is required for your startups. As some of these startups can really take off from here, particularly which are technology enabled, which are able to get inside homes without too much of effort. I think they will really take off from here. So that's about what I would like to say.
Rajesh?
Thank you. And again, appreciation for Professor and Ms. Shivangi for having coordinated this, and of course, Akshay. I'd just like to sign off with two thoughts. Thought one is the sad reality is none of us have handled a corona crisis in our life before across the entire spectrum of generations. So I will just share one, a thought or a quote that I try and live by, which is plan as if you're going to be alive for the next 100 years. Live life as if you're going to die tomorrow morning. Right? So it's not only from a personal point of view, but also from a business point of view. Plan long term, but obviously you have to handle the short term, medium term, immediate term crisis and issues. Second point is, I have tremendous confidence in the unchangeable behavior of shoppers, consumers, especially in India. The fact that in spite of lockdown, we saw people thronging markets, in spite of enough data and enough newspaper reports and televisions, people are moving around without masks. The minute liquor shops opened, you had a stampede. So given all these realities, like Mr. Vidur was talking about, please be positive, please be optimistic, be ready for a bounce back, and it could happen anytime. Like I said, the only constraint, the only challenge might be sentiment. Other than that, I don't think any major bottleneck is going to be there for the bounce back. And all the very best to each of the panelists. Take care and stay safe.
Good.
Thank you, Rajesh. On that positive note, we'd like to end the session for today. We also thank our members for their constant support and the team at the back for curating this session. I take this opportunity again to acknowledge our sponsors and partners for today. Event partner, Ideal Insurance Brokers, taxation partner, Tax Mantra Global, supply chain and logistics partner, Justify, session partners, PitchBooks and Easy Datun. Our next sector in focus on MA Reboot 2 Industry Edition is blockchain, which is on the 26th of May at 11:30 a.m. IST. I look forward to seeing all of you there again. See you soon. Stay safe. Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, Shivan.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a nice time.
Thank you.
Enjoy, be safe. Take care of your families.
Thank you very much, and everyone. Thank you.
All the best. God bless us all. Thank you.